Final reading for February from our book of the month, Beyond Religion, by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And here is what he has to say that is pertinent to what we are up to today. I look forward to a day when we are all more aware of our feelings and emotions and feel a greater sense of responsibility both toward ourselves and toward the wider world. Wouldn't that be wonderful? To bring about this better world, let us all, old and young, not as members of this nation or that nation, not as members of this faith or that faith, but simply as individual members of this great human family of 7 billion. Let us strive together with vision, with courage, and with optimism. This is my humble plea. Within the scale of the life of the cosmos, a human life is no more than a tiny blip. Each one of us is a visitor to this planet, a guest, who has only a finite time to stay. What greater folly could there be than to spend this short time lonely, unhappy, and in conflict with our fellow visitors? Far better, surely, to use our short time in perusing a meaningful life, enriched by a sense of connection with and service toward others. So far, of the 21st century, just over a decade is gone. The major part of it is to come. It is my hope that this will be a century of peace, a century of dialogue, a century when a more caring, responsible, and compassionate humanity will emerge. This is my prayer. Thank you, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, for your wisdom and guidance this month. Today's affirmation: I am one with the Infinite One. My thoughts, words, and actions are filled with its harmony, love, beauty, warmth, and order. Knowing my unity with all things, I walk in the world filled with loving compassion, and so it is. Please stand and join me with conviction. I am one with the Infinite One. My thoughts, words, and actions are filled with its harmony, love, beauty, warmth, and order. Knowing my unity with all things, I walk in the world filled with loving compassion, and so it is. A man was on his way from Jerusalem down to Jericho when he was set upon by robbers who stripped and beat him and went off, leaving him half dead. It so happened that a priest was going down the same road, and when he saw this man, the priest went to the other side. So too, a Levite came to the place, and when he saw the beaten man, he went past on the other side too. But a Samaritan who was going that way came upon him, and when he saw him, he was moved to pity. He went up and bandaged his wounds, bathing them with oil and wine. Then he lifted him onto his own beast, brought him to an inn, and looked after him. The next day he produced 2 silver pieces and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Look after him, and if you spend more, I will repay you on my way back." I can imagine that the Good Samaritan, that's how we think of this story, as the story of the Good Samaritan, was asking himself, what would love do? Here's a man, beaten, half dead. What would love do? Love would tend to his wounds. Love would carry him to the nearest inn. Love would take care of him overnight. Love would give the innkeeper money to keep caring for him until he was able to go about on his way. And love would say, and you know what, if this isn't enough, just let me know when I get back, and I'll give you more. Because this is what love would do. And to let you know what an even larger idea of love this was, it's important for you to know that at the time, the Jews and the Samaritans were sworn enemies. They hated each other. And yet this man, this Samaritan, did what a priest, a Jewish priest and a Levite, a Jewish teacher, would not do for his own. This enemy did what love would do, cared for the man, saw to his well-being. Now, Jesus told this story in response to a question from a lawyer. You know how lawyers are? Let's get every detail right on. And the lawyer had asked him, what's the greatest of the commandments? And the truth is, the lawyer, or the Pharisee, he probably was actually trying to trick Jesus, was actually trying to get Jesus to contradict the 10 Commandments, right? And Jesus elevated the answer even further. He said, the greatest commandment is love. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God. This is the greatest of the commandments. So then the lawyer is still kind of trying to get him tied up and says, well, but what, who is my neighbor then? And Jesus told this story of the Good Samaritan, which seems to imply to me that even those I might consider my enemies are my neighbors, and that I am commanded to love these individuals. Are you kidding? Please. Do you have any enemies? Are you feeling particularly inclined to love them? And I don't mean enemies like people that you're fighting with. I mean enemies, people you don't like, people you wish they'd change, people you have judgments about. Oh, what? I'm supposed to love them? And what is love? It means releasing my judgments. It means standing in the truth of who they are as spiritual beings, recognizing and seeing them for who they are, honoring and blessing them on their own walk in life. This is love. Then, Jesus taught us to see everything through this lens of love. Everything through this lens of love. Now, we're here today specifically to talk about values. We've been talking all month about in the spirit of unity, oneness, connection, in the spirit of knowing that there's only one thing happening and we are all expressions of this one life, and we are called to be a certain way as we walk the spiritual path together. Because here we are, walking the spiritual path together, right? We're bumping up against each other, maybe having a hard time sometimes. Sometimes it's a little easier. But if we walk in the spirit of unity and connection, we are walking in the spirit of love for one another. And the way that we can really be, one of the ways, we've been talking about different ways all month, but one of the ways we can really get in touch with what is ours to do and be is to get in touch with our values. What do we value? Now, I think I can conjecture. I don't want to put words in Jesus' mouth or thoughts in his head or emotions in his heart, but I think it's pretty easy to think that love was probably Jesus' top value. Do you think? Because what is a value? When I talk about values, what am I talking about? I am talking about those characteristics, those qualities that you find intrinsically important. They just are important to you. They are the core ideals that guide you in how to conduct your life such that your life is meaningful and satisfying to you. The core ideals, the core principles, that wherever you go, it is your joy to embody and express those. And I'm thinking for Jesus, one of his top values was love. An ideal, a characteristic, a quality that he found intrinsically important. In fact, I would posit That is the value, the main value. And certainly he had other values that we're going to talk about later, but that was kind of his main thing, was love. Yes? And we are told to walk in those steps. How well are we walking in love? I've stumbled a few times. How about you? I stumbled just this morning. And, I've only been up 6 hours. How could that be? And yet, this is what I am called to be and to truly value in my life and to live from that characteristic, that quality, that ideal, to walk in the footsteps of the great teacher. Now, there are lots of values we might have, yes? And there's probably as many sets of values as there are people in this room. What are values? Things like justice. Justice is a value. Family is a value. It's intrinsically important to many people. It just is. Joy, integrity, education. Education is a core value for many people. Health, professionalism, stability. Do you see how it's kind of like this whole laundry list of things? And because it's such a long laundry list, I actually did a little Google search, and I Googled list of values, and I got one hit that said 400 core values. I'm like, 400? Seriously? That's like, you could never work with that, right? Because if you try and care about everything, the things that are important you can't give great care to, right? And so it's really important for us to identify what are our core values, what are our 4 or 5 top values, the things that are most important to us. And I believe, as I said earlier, that Jesus' top value was love, that was one of his core values. What are your top core values, the things that you care about deeply? The things that are most important. And I'll tell you that here at Unity of Bellevue, we have some core values, don't we? They're going, what? Yes, we do. And you've heard them before. Really? Our core values here at Unity of Bellevue are spirituality, love, integrity, joy, and service. And your board of trustees identified those core values and defined those core values and what they mean to us. And if you'd like more information about that, you can talk to me or to any one of our board members, and they'll go deeper with you on what our organization's core values are and how we see those expressing. But that's, for me to share it with you, is a whole other sermon, which I'll do sometime soon, actually, now that I think about it. So those are our core values. What are your core values? First thing to know when we're thinking about values is, where do they come from? Where did your values come from? The things that are intrinsically important to you. Why are those the things that are intrinsically important to you? Well, they kind of came from 2 places that are really kind of the same place. The first place they came from is your upbringing. Your family, your friends, your experiences. We come to value certain things by how we were raised, what was important to them, what are the experiences that we had that taught us that one thing or another was more important to us than some other one thing or another. And then the other place that they come from is from our culture. Yeah. That's a little scary, frankly. Our values come from our culture, the social culture, the spiritual culture, our ethnic or our national origins. These things all have to do with what we value, right? Which is one of the reasons that diversity is such a beautiful concept, because as we integrate different types of people with different kinds of experiences and practice walking in love for everyone, we become better, expanded, more evolved human beings. And how beautiful is that? Isn't that why we're here, is to learn and grow and evolve? That's the only reason we're here. And you know what? If everybody around me is like me, it doesn't challenge me to grow. It's so critical to have people around us who aren't like us. Oh, I know it's a mixed bag. Because then you have to be thoughtful, you have to be loving, you have to be kind. Even when someone is challenging your values or what you believe or what you think. Oh well. Because we're here to learn and to evolve and grow, and it's easy to say we're learning when everybody's like us. I would challenge you that perhaps we're not really learning, we're just thinking that we're learning. So our values come from our upbringing, our culture, our environment. And for me anyway, they've evolved. My personal values have evolved. A few things have remained consistent, but over time, my values now at 60 are way different than when I was 25. How about you? Yes? So our values, some of them stay consistent over time and some of them evolve. So why is it important for us to talk about our values and to know what our values are? Well, there's a few reasons. Probably the most important kind of worldly reason is because it is by our values that we make choices. Right? If I have a high value for family, I'm probably going to choose to spend more time with family. If I have a high value for my spiritual growth and my spiritual path, I'm going to choose to be in church on Sunday morning, even when there's a 10 a.m. football game. I just remind myself, God is more important than football. God is more important than football. God is more important than football. And some days it's hard, especially, toward the end of the season, because I really like football. But my value is spirituality. My value is growth. And knowing that and owning that and living from that place guides my choices. So probably one of the most important things is that we use our values to make decisions. We also use our values to measure those choices. Now, here's the thing, is we're not always conscious that we made a decision from a values place. Does that make sense? Sometimes we make decisions consciously or unconsciously that don't necessarily serve us, and sometimes we make decisions that do serve us. But they're not necessarily conscious because our values are so ingrained that we don't always recognize them. Does that make sense? Oh, that's just the way we do things. Have you ever said that? Well, that's just the way we do things. That's just what we do. And you know what? I love it when people say that to me because to me that's one of the biggest reasons to not do it that way. Or at least explore the possibility of not doing it that way, right? We might do it that way anyway, but let's be conscious that we're not choosing that just because it's always been that way. We're choosing that because we've been thoughtful. We've applied our values to every situation, and we're choosing wisely. There's another reason our values are important is they anchor us in our faith. The Samaritan, so anchored in his faith. Yes? Walking in love. And I'm willing to bet, projecting my own experience onto his a little bit, I'm willing to bet that from planting those seeds of love, you see, we engage the creative process. And I'm willing to bet he reaped some love from being a loving presence in the world. You see, when we know what our values are, we're conscious about it. Love, spirituality, joy, integrity, service, those are our values here at Unity, right? By planting those seeds of integrity, of love, of joy, of spirituality, we plant those seeds in consciousness and they grow. And when you know what your values are, well, I value diversity, or do you value sameness? Well, if you say you value diversity, probably that's going to start showing up in your life. If you say you value sameness, then you're probably going to get more of the same. Because by declaring our intention, by consciously acknowledging the qualities that we value most, we engage the creative process. And remember, the main teaching of the master teacher was, it is done unto us as we believe. So it's important for me to understand my values so that I am consciously engaging that creative process and engaging in behavior that represents who I truly am. Right? Because I say one thing, but then when I do another, because I'm unconscious about what I truly value, people see that. They know that we're not being authentic to what we say. They know that our inside and our outsides don't match. And more importantly than that people know, the universe knows. Because it is not done unto us as we think we believe, it is done unto us as we really believe. And that's the hard part. Because I can convince myself all kind of stuff I believe, right? That's nice. Thank you, dear. And then the universe is going to do unto me as I really believe, because that's where the conviction really lies, which is why it's so important to become conscious of our values, so that as we make decisions, as we move through life, as we walk and interact with the realities of this human experience, we're planting the seeds that we want to reap down the road. That we are engaging with the world in a way that's authentic and real, so that people and the universe can find us trustworthy, worthy of trust. So our values are important, yes? How do I know what I value? Well, let me ask you a couple questions. How do you spend your time? That will tell you a lot about what you really value. Because, I don't know about you, but I can spout off a lot of things and say I value these things. But how do I spend my time is going to tell me and the rest of the world what I truly value. You see, so many of our choices are values driven, right? What is most important to me? And I choose from that place. And the bad news is, if we look back, it tells us what is really important to us. Does that make sense? Am I saying that well? I kind of feel like I'm not saying that well. But if you want to know what you really believe, look at your results. That's Emma Curtis Hopkins' teaching. If you want to know what you really believe, look at your results. If you want to know what you really value, look at what you're doing. And that will tell you what you really value. So I have some questions for you to consider as you're thinking about, well, what do I really want to value? How do I get conscious and prioritize and select some core values that are meaningful and important to me, really? And I have 3 questions for you to think about as you consider how you want to become conscious about those intrinsic qualities and characteristics that are really important to you. The first thing is to think about, what are the choices I've made in the past that made me feel good about myself? What are the choices that I have made in the past that brought up a sense of peace for me? The sense of personal pride. And I don't mean prideful, in the unconstructive sense. I mean, you felt good about yourself. Think of a decision, a choice you've made in the past that brought you a sense of greater peace. And you can kind of then dig under that for what is the value that was present there. I can think about, for me, I chose to go to college in my early 30s. And that was kind of not something girls do in my family. They don't go to college. That was a choice I made that reflected a value for self-love. And I made it in the face of just a lot of barriers. There were a lot of reasons why that could never work. But you see, I chose the value for education, for intelligence, for wisdom, and for self-love. I chose that over all the circumstances. And by golly, I went to college. And I didn't even really know why, except that I needed to do that. And I wouldn't be standing in front of you today if I hadn't done that. So that's why, right? But you don't know that in the moment. We don't know that in the moment. So ask yourself, what choices, this is number one, for how to know how to get in touch with what you really want to value consciously. What choices have you made in the past that have felt powerful, that have felt peaceful, that have made you proud of yourself? And then kind of search under that for what was the value that was in place under that decision. And then the second question to ask yourself is, what do I admire in others? You know, we all have role models, people we look up to, don't we? I mean, I turn to Jesus so much. What would love do? What would Jesus do? This is so much of my question in life. Because although I don't love everything that's happened with his teaching in the last 800 to 1400 years, I think at its core, his teaching is so, so powerful. What do I admire in Jesus? His calm peace, and then he would go off on a little hissy fit every once in a while that was anchored in truth. If you guys haven't read the 23rd chapter of Matthew lately, I encourage you to do that. I read it this morning. It's this chapter where it's toward the end of his ministry, and he's totally going off on the Pharisees. He's like, you guys are not anchored in love here. You forget the teaching. You've forgotten the teaching. The teaching is love. And he says, you're so concerned about tithing exactly 10% that you count out your cumin and give 10% of your cumin, your spices, your herbs, right? It's like, and God doesn't care about your cumin, right? And he goes on to say, you strain out the gnats, but you forget like the big picture. It was really fun to read that this morning. So what do I admire in Jesus? I admire his commitment to love, his commitment to be the presence, but also to his commitment to justice and to hold others accountable and to call them out, to call the Pharisees out when they are not stepping up to the truth of the teaching. See, so what do you admire in others? What do you suppose are the values, the qualities, and the characteristics that are under what you admire? Jesus said, I'm going to read this little part because I want to be sure and get it right. He said, I can't find it. I can't find it. Never mind, not important. His values, he said, what is most important? I'm in Matthew chapter 23. He said, what is most important? You're worrying about all these laws and all this stuff. What is most important is three things: justice, mercy, and faith. Justice, mercy, and faith. And I'm willing to say we now know four of Jesus' core values: love, justice, mercy, and faith. And isn't it funny, justice and mercy, you could kind of roll those up into love, couldn't you? Because if we're truly being loving, we're also being just, and we're also being merciful. So now we know something around four of his core values just by what he said, how he behaved. So look at the people you admire. What do they do? How do they behave? Why do you admire them? And what are the intrinsic qualities that are an expression as them? Tells you what you value. And then the third question to ask yourself is this: what do I want to be known for? What do I want to be known for? What do I want people to say about me? Do I want people to say, oh, that Marla, she's so cranky. She's really hard to get along with, and she's controlling. See, these are all my issues. just letting you know. Blah, 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 blah. Do I want to be known for all of that? Or do I want to be known for my love, my wisdom, my grace, my power? Is that what I want to be known for? Now, all of those things are present in me. Let me just be clear with you. The controlling, the whatever, all of that other stuff, the cranky, that's all in there. Let's go back to last week, right? But I have gained self-mastery to some degree. Sometimes I'll lose it, but I'm practicing growing in self-mastery such that those qualities are not the qualities that run my life. The qualities that run my life are love, wisdom, grace, power. That's what I want to be known for. And that tells me what I value, doesn't it? Now, it is interesting to think about love as the lens. I was thinking about this, if Jesus' core values are mercy and faith and justice, but his lens was love. Does that make sense? He saw everything through the lens of love. And I was just thinking about this over this last weekend. What if we just all chose love as our top core value? What if we just say, let's just all move into agreement. Love is going to be our top core value. That's the thing that we want to practice the most. And then we allow that to be the lens through which everything else unfolds for us. And then we can say, and how love is going to show up for me in my values is love of family, love of justice, love of mercy, love of whatever it might be for you. But that really what we're doing is we're anchoring in love. And then asking ourselves these 3 questions. What choices have I made that made me feel powerful, peaceful, joy-filled? What do I admire in others? What do I want to be known for? And then mine under the answers to those questions for what it is I truly, deeply value. And then